All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Like I said, my name is Leandra Mallory. I'm the program coordinator here at the San Diego County Breastfeeding Coalition, and we're so excited for this presentation by Kendall Stewart on the motherhood mental load. I'm gonna go ahead and read Kendall's bio, and then we're gonna go ahead and jump in. All right. Kendall is a dedicated and compassionate licensed marriage and family therapist who supports individuals and families as they navigate life's complexities, especially in the wake of trauma. With a warm, down-to-earth approach, Kendall helps clients understand how their behaviors and communication styles help their relationships, empowering them to build deeper and more authentic connections. Passionate about working with children, parents, and Black women, Kendall creates safe, affirming spaces where clients can process emotions, heal from difficult experiences, and grow in meaningful ways. Whether you're a parent trying to show up for your child, for your kids, or someone figuring out who you are after a tough chapter, Kendall is there to walk alongside you. Grounded in culturally responsive therapy and lived experience, Kendall brings curiosity, care, and clarity to the work, helping each client feel seen, heard, supported on their path toward healing and growing. So good. Welcome, Kendall. We are so happy that you were here.
Yes, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here and excited to share knowledge with y'all. All right, and go to the next slide for me. And I want to just share a little bit more about myself. All right, so like Leandra mentioned, my name is Kendall Stewart. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also a professor, and I teach at Tarzana Treatment Center, where I support folks who are working towards getting their substance use disorder counseling certificates. I'm a wife and a mother to an amazing little 7-year-old girl. She's so fun and so sweet. I love being her mother. And I actually own my own private practice, which is actually named after my daughter. My private practice is called Ray of Light Therapy. And like Leandra mentioned, I love supporting individuals and families, building relationships. And my biggest passion truly is working with kids. And in that, that means supporting caregivers, mothers, parents, because if we can, as the adults in those kiddos' lives, be able to regulate ourselves and teach those kiddos regulation, then that makes all the difference and it's like the best support that the kids can have. So just a little bit more about me. Go to our next slide, please. So what I want us to do now is start off with a mindfulness exercise. A lot of times we are running from thing to thing or have a bunch of things on our mind. So I want us to just take a moment to try and get a little bit more present here. So what I would like you all to do is take 3 slow, easy, deep breaths. I will guide you through it, or you can follow your own pace. So what we're going to do is take a slow, deep breath in, and then hold it. Slow, deep breath out. And then take another deep breath in and pause, and a slow, deep breath out. And then our last time here, we're going to take a slow, deep breath in, and then a slow, deep breath out. Now I want you to pick a color, any color. It's usually easier if you use your favorite color, but any color will do. And I want you to notice all the things around you in that color, all the different shades of that color, items in that color. And we'll do that for about 30 seconds. And then I will let you know when to come back. Awesome. So now I want you to take a deep breath in, deep breath out, and just kind of notice where you are in this moment. All right, we'll go to our next slide. Okay, so we're going to start off by talking about like what the mental load is. That's what we're going to be talking about, is how to support yourself through the motherhood mental load. So let's first just kind of talk about what it is. So it's the invisible labor of planning, remembering, anticipating, organizing, and managing, often, not always though, but often carried disproportionately by mothers. And so, like, what that might look like is thinking about when we're thinking of the tasks that need to be done, like, how are they going to happen? When are they going to happen? Does anything need to be moved around to make sure that those things do happen? So it's all the things that people can't necessarily see that get done, that needs to get done before maybe even actually start the task. So one way to think about that is motherhood isn't just what's on your to-do list. It's also about what is on your mind. All right, go to our next one. All right, so again, just going a little bit deeper into understanding the mental load. So when we think about the task, it's meal planning. Now, a lot of times people think like meal planning is like just cooking the meal and getting it in front of folks, but there's so many other steps that are part of that mental load piece that needs to get done. It's thinking about what kinds of food you are going to be serving. Like, do you have someone who maybe in your family who has like allergies? Or maybe they take medication, you have to worry about like how food interacts with their medication. Or they're taking medication, like when they can eat if they're taking that. So now it's like the planning of the time, what you're going to cook, when you're going to cook it, how you're going to get the ingredients, all the things. Do you have the supplies to cook the items? Like all the things that you have to think about to make sure that when you're in that moment of cooking, you can do what you need to do and then get the food in front of that person. And then we think about next, we're talking about school events. Again, it's not just about showing up to the school event. Maybe it's taking out time. Who's going to be doing pickup? Who's going to be doing drop off? Again, thinking about food. Are you going to eat beforehand? Are you going to need to bring snacks for during? What do they need to wear? To change clothes? Like all the different things that come into that moment. Educational development, household tasks, doctor's appointments. Again, planning them, making sure that you have all the right questions that you want to get asked in that moment. How are you going to remember those things? Again, are you going to need to move things around? Emotional support. That is definitely one thing that I think people don't always consider a task because, of course, yes, oftentimes we're choosing to show up for folks and support them emotionally. But sometimes it's not always planned when that person might need emotional support, right? Especially when we're thinking about kiddos, like they come home and you just don't know how their day is going to be and you want to check in and you just sometimes have to respond in the moment, which means then you are also taking on an emotional load because you don't want to see that your kiddo like upset or hurt. And then also too, maybe it's like that hour you spend supporting your kiddo is an hour of things that don't get done. So then how is that going to further impact the rest of your day? Then we think about celebrations, societal expectations, how you're supposed to be showing up for your kiddos, especially when they're really young. Like we're thinking about like nap times, breastfeeding, what they're eating, the types of clothing, diapers, all of those things, like what does society expect from us? And then another one is definitely the task of safety. Now, this one is not just about physical safety, which is absolutely important, right? We're thinking about like all the things that might be like a danger and what to watch out for, but then also emotional safety, things about like societal safety, like things out in the world, how they're going to be interacting with folks. So it's constantly thinking about, okay, how can I keep my kiddo and the people around me safe? Which then leads to the emotions, the emotional load as well. Like we have the mental load, the thoughts, and then the emotional load. Then we have anxiety. So you're feeling anxious, you're feeling that in your body, making maybe a little bit more tired, irritable, because when we're thinking of all of these things and dealing with all these things and have these different emotions, our distress tolerance or how much we can tolerate in those moments ends up getting that window ends up being a little smaller. So we find ourselves being a little bit more reactive to things that maybe we aren't always reactive to. And then we have the guilt, right? How we're maybe not reaching or meeting those expectations that we set for ourselves or the world is set around us. The guilt of if we are feeling anxious, how we're showing up, if we're irritable, how we're showing up. And then there's that decision fatigue where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of making decisions. Just do whatever. just whatever works. And then sometimes, again, it leads into that guilt or that worry of, okay, well then how's that going to impact, how is this decision going to impact the rest of the thing? Then there's resentment. Maybe you're frustrated because you're needing support and aren't getting that support. So then that leads to resentment, which then kind of creates like conflict or kind of like a weird energy in your relationships. And then because you're doing this, feel like you're doing this all on your own, there's that sense of loneliness where you just feel isolated and like maybe nobody understands. And then we have anger, stress, sadness, the shame, and the fear. And again, like I said, sometimes these expectations come from like cultural demands, like what is like a good mom, perfectionism, and unrealistic self-demands. So that when we think about the things for ourselves, that can come from all different spaces. Maybe we're thinking about what we see on social media or the people around us, or maybe we're thinking about how we're raised and we're like, okay, how we were raised isn't quite how I want to raise my children. So instead, I'm going to do everything different. But then that means maybe we're setting the bar like to perfectionism, because then if we deviate anything from what was different, then it's wrong. And that's not always the case. So we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about what that might look like as far as giving grace and all those things. All right. So next page, please. All right. Also, we're thinking about like mom brain. I'm sure lots of folks have heard that, or being scatterbrained. And I want to just affirm for you all, it's not just forgetfulness. The brain during this time is more attuned to threats, needs, and responsibility, and then constantly assessing ways to adapt and survive to the things around us. And this need definitely looks different among different cultures. So again, like I said, it's like in the beginning, like the brain is attuned to threats, needs, and responsibilities. Our brains are already wired to look for safety and comfort. And during this time, it's just heightened, which then means when it's heightened, our brain goes, oh, okay, well, that's a lot of things to think about. So we're going to start to prioritize different things that need to be supported or looked at. So an example of that might be, let's say you're washing dishes. And then you hear like a thud upstairs. So you're washing the dishes and you hear that thud. So your brain automatically goes, oh, I heard a noise. I need to go respond to that. So then you run upstairs and you notice it's just a toy dropped or a book fell. Nothing like major happened, but our bodies are in survival mode. So we're all worried and concerned. So now we're up there thinking about that. But then everything's good. We relax for that moment. We come back downstairs and we're just like, man, what was I doing before I went upstairs? And then you just take a pause, walk in the kitchen, and realize, oh yeah, dishes. And then you think, oh my gosh, I'm so scatterbrained. When actually, no, that's not really what happened. What happened was your brain prioritized safety first. It realized, okay, dishes aren't the priority in this moment. The sound is, and making sure that everything's okay. So I share that with you all to also get you in a space of understanding that these things are normal. Your brain is not broken. It's actually doing what it's supposed to do, which is prioritizing the necessary tasks for safety and comfort. And I know sometimes we always think like, okay, well, if I know that, then why does my brain do that? Because our brains are very complex and sometimes also very simple, to where we have to learn to rewire our brains and retrain it to go, okay, when we do this, this is what happens. So maybe it's like you go upstairs, the coming down and taking that deep breath, slowing yourself down, you're giving your brain space to regulate and get back into the task. So again, it's just about just kind of rewiring our brains and having a different perspective of what's happening for us. All right, next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about cognitive distortions and cultural pressures. So cognitive distortions are different ways that our brain might think, or the thoughts we might have that maybe aren't so helpful. So one of those is what we call should statements, which is like, I should be always. Anytime you see always, that's usually not where it should be happening. So here we go. So he says, I should always be patient, graceful, and productive. So when I think of, especially the word like patient, a lot of times, especially now, I think there's a shift in some folks as far as how to parent. That might be a little bit different than how they were parented. And patience wasn't always present, which meant like kind of like maybe you're getting yelled at a lot, you're getting, rushed a lot or things like that. And that didn't feel comfortable to a lot of folks. So they're deciding, okay, I'm going to use what called like gentle parenting or conscious parenting. There's lots of different labels for it. But then what ends up happening is though, sometimes we fall into the state of perfection where if you get a little upset or frustrated and maybe raise your voice a little bit, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm a bad parent. I'm a bad mom because I did not stay patient. But sometimes we're human and we just also need a reminder of like, okay, things aren't always going to be perfect. And you're frustrated too. And it's okay to also have your own feelings. And again, that feeling needing to be productive all the time. That might look like maybe creating like a magical childhood for your kids, for your child. And that also is a lot of pressure to make sure that every moment feels like magic or the best. The next one is I should be happy all the time. Yes, we all strive to be happy. And at the same time, having a range of emotions is the human experience. And that feeling can come of needing to be happy all the time, can come from, especially for like Black women or women of color, is the space of like, we're not really given a lot of space to be angry or frustrated or even sad. So then we kind of put on this mask of wanting to show everyone that we're happy or have it all together all the time. And that in itself is exhausting. And then we end up shaming ourselves if we don't present in a specific way. Or the next one is I should be able to keep up with all the things I did before kids, before your baby came, before you got pregnant, all those things, right? I should be able to keep up with all the things I did before. And yes, there's always that part that is still a part of who you were before, is still a part of you. And at the same time, you have a new human being in your life. So life needs to change because it just does. And the expectation that things should look the same and that you should be able to do all those things with a baby or a child or as a caregiver is oftentimes unrealistic because there's just honestly not enough time in the day to add in caring for another life. And you've changed as well. Another part of this though is sometimes is the idea of should be able to keep up with all the things you did before. And sometimes you are able to keep up with some things you did before. And then there's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing these things anymore. Maybe I should only be at home and taking care of my kid, like the judgment that might come from that. So we think of should statements, it pretty much is almost like telling you, like, you have to fit in this box. And if you deviate from that at all, there's something wrong. Like that's what you feel inside. So when you start to have those feelings, you want to start to try and ask yourself, like, whose expectations are these? Are these expectations that have been given to me by other people? And then are they expectations that I put on myself? If the expectations you put on yourself, maybe it's like, okay, is this really useful to me right now? Is this really the way I want my life to look, is to have these like heavy feelings of guilt or shame? And if not, like, how can we start to adjust and think a little bit, our perspective a little bit differently? And then another one might be if it's not something that you put on yourself, where did you learn it from? And when you learned it, was that perspective useful then and no longer fits now? So again, it's kind of taking some inventory of what's happening for you and shifting that mindset some so that you can start to also kind of like retrain your brain, your thought process to go, okay, this is actually how things could be or can be with some flexibility in that. All right, go to the next one for me, please. Cognitive distortion of all or nothing thinking. Now, this can show up in so many different ways. But it's either I'm a perfect mom or I'm failing. I will give an example of I know when my daughter was born and I was, trying to breastfeed, definitely was challenging, as I'm sure you all know. And I remember thinking, like, if I don't do it this way, like completely natural without any support or anything like that, then I'm doing it wrong. Like I'm failing, that I'm not able to give her the nourishment or what she needs or have that connection, right? So it was like, it's either this or nothing. And then I was able to go to a lactation clinic and they were able to support me in different ways of like, hey, it can look like this, you can do this, to be able to like show me like it's not just this kind of cookie cutter, right? So all or nothing thinking kind of plays into that should thinking too as well, right? Where it's like either this or that, nothing else. And that's not all, that's honestly, I'm trying to think of a time when that is helpful. Nothing's coming to mind now. So all or nothing thinking can be pretty challenging to try and justify, which is why one way you can kind of help yourself through those moments is we look at reframing or doing like a reality check. So we have some questions here, right? Is this thought true? So then, okay, if I'm not only exclusively breastfeeding, does that mean that I'm not caring for my child? Does that mean I don't care? Does that mean that I'm just too lazy? Is it helpful? Is that thought helpful? And they're like, okay, well, maybe thinking those things can be like motivating to like help me, push myself a little bit harder. But if you push yourself past your limit, and when we have like these really challenging thoughts, it can be emotionally draining and then physically draining. So then sometimes it can also take away from the goal you're trying to meet. So is it helpful? Maybe a little bit, but is it more harmful? Possibly. So again, slow yourself down and think through this a little bit. Is it based in fear or facts? Sometimes fear can be helpful, sometimes. And then sometimes it can hinder us. And then we end up kind of pulling back and really sheltering ourselves or confining ourselves and not opening ourselves up to different options that actually could be better for us. And then if we say, okay, the fear is like, oh, I'm expecting this to happen. But the fact is, if that does happen, I have the tools to support or help. And maybe that can also help balance, like, okay, I'm not stuck with this one option. And then also, like, what would compassion sound like in this moment? What would it look like to give yourself grace, to give yourself understanding? Like, a lot of times we'll always say, like, what would you tell a friend in this moment? Like, what would you tell a friend in this moment? What would you tell a sister, an aunt, a cousin, somebody you're close to, or even just another woman parent walking by? Like, how would you show them compassion? And then how can you kind of turn that back for yourself? All right, next slide, please. All right, so again, we're talking about some more tools for healing and reclaiming our mental space. So we have some CBT core questions. So real quick, so CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. And in short, what that is it helps us understand how our thoughts and our feelings impact our actions and behaviors. So some of the questions to help explore that is, again, like we talked about, is this thought helping me or holding me back? Is this thought taking away from me more than allowing me to show up in this space or in this situation or in this moment to move forward? And again, what's a more compassionate version of this thought? How can I give myself grace? Let me think about the cultural self-compassion. A lot of times as Black women and women of color, we are perceived as tough because we have to put on like the shell of safety because it's needed for protection. So a lot of times people are like, oh, they're kind of rough, they're kind of hard, they're kind of distant. And a lot of times, if that's truly what you're feeling inside, like you're feeling like you need to push away or you need to feel like yourself like safe and like protect yourself, is because we're putting on that shell because we aren't feeling safe in those moments. Sometimes it is perceived that way and that's not actually what's happening, but sometimes we do need to put that on. And when we put that on, that does not take away from your softness, from your vulnerability, from your nurturing. That actually in some ways adds to it, right? Because if we think about nurturing, that also adds in protection, right? So two things can be true. We can be strong, we can be tough, we can be, a little bit distant and protective, and at the same time, soft, vulnerable, and all of like the kind of like more warm, softer emotions that sometimes come along with that. So honoring that two things, honestly, honoring that a lot of things can be true in one moment. And like I said, when we think about like toughness or strength or hardness, a lot of times, that is perceived and that may not be the reality of what's happening. But when it is, and it feels necessary for you, that is not something to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. It's honoring that moment of like, oh wow, something's happening for me right now where I feel like I need to protect myself, my family, my kids. And in this moment, how am I still being that soft, nurturing, supportive person that I truly am? And then we think about rest and boundaries and joy are legitimate forms of resistance. Absolutely. Because the world we live in definitely teaches us that you have to do all the things at once. You have to be a working mom. If you're a working mom, if you're out of the house working, then you're not showing up for your kids enough. But if you're at home working, then you're not um, providing for society in a certain way. And both of those are untrue. Like motherhood looks different for each person. Parenting looks different for each person. And in all of that, kind of like having to do all the things at once and be all the things at once, rest is a form of resistance because it's pushing back against kind of like what's expected of us. Boundaries and joy, again, in a world that is teaching us that we have to be open and all these things and happy all the time. Yes, rest, boundaries, and joy are ways to say, hey, I'm not going to let the world show or harden me or kind of dim my light in any way. And then we think about boundaries. Yes, boundaries are so, so important. I know folks probably hear about it all the time. Boundaries, my boundaries, my boundaries. Absolutely. And sometimes folks think that boundaries mean like pushing people away, saying like, you got to get away from me, you're crossing my boundaries. And another way to look at it is that boundaries are ways that people can interact with you in a calm, supportive, safe, loving way. So boundaries are ways that people can be in community with you. And then you honoring the boundaries of other people is how you can be in community with them. So boundaries can be a way of being in community with each other. At the same time, you also have to honor your own boundaries, hold your own boundaries. That is very, very important. Sometimes the part that we sometimes forget is how am I honoring my own boundaries? So those are just different tools and spaces and ways to look at how we can heal and then reclaim some of our mental space. All right, next slide, please. All right, so some more coping tools for overwhelm. Practice micro joys, brief, intentional moments of peace or delight. So one can be like sitting down to intentionally listen to your favorite song. The key word there is intentionally, not just play it and then just kind of like keep doing what you're doing, which is helpful, right? Coupling like difficult tasks with things you enjoy. But sometimes you really need to sit down and intentionally enjoy the music. Feel that happiness in your body, the happy memories that come along with it. Slowing yourself down and labeling those moments so that you can kind of put yourself in the mindset of like, I'm going to enjoy this moment, this song. And then two, micro joys like we did in the beginning, we did like that mindfulness moment. You can kind of do like a micro joy. Maybe it's if you're walking from one meeting to the next, you put on your joyful playlist, you hit play, you walk to your next meeting, give yourself enough time to listen to the full song, slowly take some deep breaths and be able to help transition. Like you can maybe leave what happened in this meeting and walk into the next and be ready to go, or into your space, into your house, into other rooms, whatever that might look like and whatever you need for yourself. I know I like to do it when I'm like coming from like different tasks in the house because I'll get like really fixated on one thing and I'm like, okay, hold on, I need a break, enjoy myself, do this, and then move to the next so that I know like, okay, that was good, a little bit of a celebration, and then move to the next. The next one is name it to claim it. Label the emotion or stressor to reduce its power. Once we're able to identify what the emotion is, we are better able to address it. So one example of this might be like if you say you're sad. And when you're sad, you're like, okay, what can I do to help myself when I'm sad? I can watch a funny video. I can read something that makes me laugh or whatever, like just kind of find a way to make myself happy. Let's say you do that and you're like, gosh, that didn't really help. Normally it does. What's happening? sometimes you have to slow yourself down and go, what am I truly feeling? Because within like sadness can also be loneliness or other emotions. But let's say we're looking at loneliness. You're like, oh, wow. Actually, when I slow myself down, I realize I'm lonely. I need to call a friend or schedule something to go see somebody. Oh, even think about that makes me feel better. Right. So being able to name exactly what it is helps you, one, not be so afraid of it, because then you know that once you know what it is, you can find the tool to help support you in that specific emotion. And then also find the actual tool that's going to help you move through that emotion. And then we have positive self-talk to shift thinking patterns. We talk about how does compassion look for you, all those things, how does giving yourself grace. And this is a great example of it. Instead of I'm failing at this, try today is hard, but I'm doing my best and that's enough. So let's say you're at a day and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm only showing up today at 50% capacity. That's all I got. Okay. If we reframe that, it's like, wow, I'm showing up at full capacity because this is the capacity I have, and I'm still showing up at full capacity. Right. So just like sometimes those small reframes, those small shifts can be really helpful. Oh, next slide, please. All right. So now we're talking about finding that connection, making sure that you are creating room for it. So if you're doing it all, then you're not able to make room for the things that might give you more space, right? Because you're so focused on doing all the tasks, make sure your house looks perfect and everything is put together, every dish is washed after every meal, all those things. When you kind of slow yourself down and go, okay, let me prioritize the things that need to be done, then you're able to show up differently and make room for other things that will bring you like kind of like that peace, that slowness, that ease when it's needed. Don't forget to lean into the community that you already have. Once you've kind of created some room, then you can lean into those folks that you already have, your friends, your family, your chosen family. And then even then, if that feels kind of tough, then you can find different groups, affinity-based support groups, in person, online, play date groups, just finding ways to find community and connection in different ways. Because you're really not meant to do parenting or to be a mother in isolation. I guess as parenting is often rooted in communal care. So we want to make sure that we are trying to reclaim that, bring that back to ourselves. All right, next. So something to keep in mind. You don't need to be everything. You don't need to do everything. You just need to be present enough, loved enough, supported enough, and you are enough. I know one of the things I remember a while ago when I first had my daughter, someone asked me like, okay, what were the things that you needed for your daughter? Like, what were the absolute things you needed? I said, needed? That list was extremely short. I needed a way to feed her. I needed a place for her to sleep safely. And I needed to make sure that she was loved. After that, everything else was something I could have figured out. People are like, what about diapers? That was definitely like in my mind a need. And at the same time, if I didn't have any, I'm sure we would have figured that out. And I think about that even when we had her, I was very like privileged to be able to have a support system that where we needed and wanted for nothing because I was in grad school. And at the same time, if I didn't have that support, we would have figured it out. And I think once I had that kind of realization, I realized everything I needed, I already had, like absolutely needed. Everything else was kind of helpful and supportive, and I loved it and very grateful for it. But sometimes we have to kind of just simplify things. It helps us kind of slow things down. All right, next. So as we kind of finish up throughout the day, if you take a moment, I want you to kind of just think about, take that deep breath for yourself. Think about what's one thing that you are releasing today. Priority, I'm sorry, not priority, one task that you're releasing, thought, expectation. What's one thing you're taking with you? And what's one way you can celebrate yourself? It can be a big celebration, a small celebration, but what's one way you can celebrate yourself? All right, next, please. And then just some books I wanted you to share with you all to like check out that are really helpful, just to help kind of think about different things, help you feel like you're not making this up. I know a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling here. We are not alone in these struggles. You are probably experiencing things that tons of other people are experiencing. And by hearing that or reading that or talking to other people can help with the loneliness or the isolation you might feel. And then at that time, then maybe you'll feel a bit more open to reach out for support and how to shift some of that as well. And then next. And then if you want to contact me, that is my email, my phone number, and my Instagram, I guess, handle name. I'm not sure what folks are calling it now, but that is there if you want to reach out to me. And that is it. Thank you all for allowing me to share with you. I truly appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kendall, for joining us. I'm going to check and see if there are any questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section or in the chat. Let me see. Yeah, I don't see any questions, but I have a question if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is one way, like, what are some like successful ways that you've seen in communicating with partners about the mental load that we carry to where they're receptive to it and we can work through that?
Absolutely. That's a great one. One I suggest for folks, because the mental load can feel overwhelming, is maybe writing it down for yourself or finding some way to like kind of sort through what's happening for you. And then once you kind of have that like solid in you of how like, okay, this doesn't feel so overwhelming. Because of course, when you're thinking about it, you're like, oh my gosh, and this was going on, this was going on. It's like, okay, hold on. And then also keeping it simple, saying, hey, this whole process is feeling very overwhelming for me. And this is why. I'm feeling what's called like the mental load. And maybe taking one task and saying, so like cooking, right? Like I said before, like the task of like, okay, who needs to eat what time, where, how am I going to get it? How am I, like all the things. And giving that example, I'm like, hey, with just this one task, these are all the things that are happening for me. And it would be helpful if maybe you can, whatever your ask is in that moment. I think just really simplifying it, one, getting your thoughts out, sticking to one example and say, this is just an example of what I experience, and then going from there. And again, sharing it from a space of what you're experiencing, and then allowing them to respond to you of what they are seeing, experiencing, how they're feeling, right? We talk like the I statements, like trying to keep it there. So that's why it's helpful to write it down too, so that maybe you don't get too emotional in the moment, which I get, right? Because you're like, listen, I need help and I need it now. I need you to hurry up. And it's like, okay, hold on, let me just pull it back and give yourself a little bit more structure around it.
Oh man, that's so good. Thank you
You're
so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I always tell folks too, if it becomes a bigger thing, always, as an advocate of couples therapy, I personally don't do couples therapy, but I can refer you to a good couples therapist. But absolutely, like, don't be afraid to also kind of help ask for some like outside kind of unbiased support too.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, well, thank you so much for being here and for doing this lunch and learn with us. And it was so great, and we appreciate your time. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you everyone for joining us, all the attendees. It was so great. We will be sure to upload this recording and send it to you guys and get that on our websites as well. Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you.